I'm here to welcome Elena Leonova, current SVP of Product at Spryker. Those of you who are following this show, you know that we like to talk to datapreneurs, the data savvy, the data curious, people who use data to run their businesses. And a lot of our discussions really around how to make the data more consumable for teams that actually need it. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today and share with you a little bit about have Elena share a little bit about her background and her history with the e-commerce domain, which she's been part of for a long time. And it's a little bit different from our typical conversations in the past, where we're venturing a little bit outside of the B2B SaaS world and talking about e-commerce, talking about how data is used in e-commerce, how Spryker uses data internally to empower their teams to take good decisions and drive their business day to day. So with that, let me welcome Elena. Elena, do you mind just sharing a quick introduction on your part?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for having me here on the show. As you already mentioned, so my name is Elena Leonova, and I'm currently an SVP of Product at Spryker. So for those of you who don't know who Spryker is, we are one of the leading digital commerce platforms out there. We're specifically focusing on enterprise segment. And we're working we're working across different geographies, from the Europe to the US, and pretty much everywhere in the world where people do want to power their commerce with a system like Spryker. So obviously have a lot of experience on doing this, and as Sim already mentioned, I have been in the e-commerce space and digital commerce platform space for the last 15 years. And have seen a lot of different shapes and forms, how the data is being used and sometimes not used in order to actually get to the outcomes that customers want, and also into building the best of the best products for them.
Great. So, Elena, let's dive straight into it. You've already covered a little bit about what Spryker does, but maybe share with us a little bit of the history on Spryker, the origin story of the company, the breadth of the solution that blew me away when you talked to us about what you guys do. And let's dig a little bit deeper into that before we dive into more questions about how you leverage data in the e-commerce domain.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, so Spryker is a digital commerce platform. What's really unique about us is that we're purposely focusing on enterprise market segment. What is really important there, and why I mention it distinctly, is because in enterprise market segment, you typically deal with a lot of data. You also deal with a lot of requirements and demand, and a lot of performance, and lots of customers who actually go into that digital commerce site or portal, or however our customers call it, in order to actually transact. And what's also another really important uniqueness about our solution is that over the years of Spryker, and we're about 8 years old now, we have launched pretty much all the different business models that are available out there for people to do digital commerce. So we started with a typical B2C, where you can launch a site, that we're all familiar with, to buying random books and clothes and what have you. And then we went into the B2B, which also became really popular within the last couple of years. From there, we went to the marketplace business model, because there are a lot of enterprise companies who want to launch their niche marketplaces, and they're inviting their partners to sell alongside them, because they want to offer that end-to-end solution to their customers as well. So, so that's actually what we've been doing, and that is something that is really unique about us, comparing to all the other competitors that are available out there.
Great. And Elena, you've been in the e-commerce domain for a while. So maybe speak a little bit about your past experiences. And in particular, I'm curious, you've helped really transition the e-commerce category and the space with the companies that you work with, from SMB mid-market sort of focus to enterprise accounts and leveraging data to drive that. So let's maybe share a little bit about that journey with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first met, I was sharing a little bit of my story. So I got to digital commerce pretty much by accident, because I didn't really know much about the company that I was being hired by, but the story sounded really exciting. And that company ended up being one of the most leading at that time digital commerce platforms, called Magento, now being owned by Adobe. that product was really fascinating. At that time, it had like about 24% market share globally. The product was on-prem, and we were focusing on kind of like upper mid-market to lower enterprise. But we're gonna go into a lot of details of kind of that era and how we actually used to make decisions in the absence of having a lot of data, and we'll speak about that. Then from there, I went to a completely different world, but still in digital commerce. So I went to BigCommerce, which was a SaaS-based product for small mid-market businesses. And within the 4 years that I've been there, my goal was to actually help drive this company and this product to be and to have a suitable solution for mid-market and enterprise customers, which is something that BigCommerce proudly has now, and I'm also really proud of being part of that journey. And obviously now also working at Spryker, where like it's another level of complexity because it's full-blown enterprise customers that work with us. We also have a really interesting solution because we also have kind of this hybrid cloud platform where some elements of our product is typical SaaS, some elements of our product is actually PaaS, and that actually also makes brings a lot of interesting complexity into how managing the data and how to drive all of those different data-driven decisions on the platform that is so unique in its nature.
Great. Thank you for sharing that journey. And interestingly, Elena, when I was previously at Adobe before co-founding Immersa, and happened to work in the e-commerce and the content domain, and had a really interesting perspective of the industry from where I sat. And we were lucky. I think Adobe is lucky to have Magento as part of their portfolio, and I'm proud to have played a part in that journey. But I want to go back to the comment you made about use of data, and particularly with Magento had such a wide market share, but not a lot of data because a lot of the implementations are on premise. Some of those are in the cloud, but now of course they've transitioned much more aggressively to cloud in the Adobe context. But talk to us a little bit about your experience in what type of data is available when you're, let's say, operating a product on-prem versus in a SaaS mode. And you've currently got both sort of this hybrid product you're working with. So what types of data sets do you lean on in one model versus the other?
Yeah, absolutely. Data-driven decisions in the on-prem world is quite an interesting beast because obviously you need to be relying on certain data in order to make decisions. But in reality, you actually don't have much of a data. So what was actually really interesting and what we were doing at the time. So part of Magento at that time was available on premise, or in open source world. And what it meant is that we had a repository on a GitHub where people were able to go and like download pretty much the entire repository, or they can also kind of report different ideas and bugs and suggestions to what they've seen. So that actually used to be our pretty much main source of data for us to understand how people use our product and which parts of the product we should be heavily investing in, and which parts of the product people never talk about at all. That was at that time, we didn't really understand because a lot of us were working at Magento, being available in this on-premise open source world. So a lot of us didn't even understand how the world in data, in other companies, can be different. So we, at that time, were super convinced that this is exactly what being data-driven actually is. So we will go to the GitHub, we will take a look at how many times people downloaded something, we'll take a look at number of requests, and then by approximation, we'll come up with an idea that, okay, this part of the product is being used more. We will also obviously go back to our customer success team and I'll listen to what they have to say. And we have been building those really extensive models to understand this is being used, and also being reported as a #1 contributing to the quality, for example. And also people ask for a lot of different ideas in this section. So it means that we probably should be investing in this area versus something else. And then also what was interesting is that on top of that, what we were doing in our best channel for verification of those ideas was actually Twitter. So we will come to a conclusion. We'll say, okay, so we believe that we probably need to invest in redesigning checkout, and then we'll post it on Twitter and see what people say. And then if people comment a lot and then give us a lot of likes and stuff like that, we'll be like, yeah, I know this is the right decision. We definitely should be doing that. And that was an interesting way, I would say, of being data driven in the lack of data that we actually had at the time with the product that we have.
Got it. And it's interesting. We talked to a number of companies that are operating in an open source model. There are obviously the data that is available from an open source model in terms of running and operating a business is restricted both by what is already being instrumented by the repositories that are out there, but also what will the community allow you to capture. Mm-hmm. And that can vary quite a bit depending on the industry. So I, for example, talked to an open source company in the security space, and the amount of data that their community will allow them to capture is very minimal, which makes it really hard for them to make decisions on how to run their business. But give us a sense for, on the e-commerce side, like how does the community respond to being able to capture data and use that to run the business?
Yeah, that's really interesting because like when it comes to community itself, and especially when community contributes to developing the product, I think it can also be pretty much to what you've heard. It can be different. It can have different flavors because some people would expect a lot of data to be being shared with the platform itself, and some people would prefer not to share anything. So we were dealing with pretty much both of those things. Like back at Magento, we also had this app marketplace where we had a lot of different additional ideas and additional products that our community has developed. And so we were able to see how much and how often some of those ideas are being downloaded or installed. In some cases, the community members themselves actually were implementing a little bit of telemetry and kind of having that data being sent to them, but we still were not accessing that data as much. So we were still kind of mostly relying on a lot of this voice of mouth pretty much in order for people to tell us. But regardless, kind of even in that kind of really interesting setup, we were able to build a quite successful product. And the biggest source of verification of that for us was the Vapalizer, that where you can see in the browser how much your product is being installed. So that was kind of the biggest number that we were always tracking and seeing how that number was growing.
Got it. And Elena, you mentioned to me how you've used Twitter for feedback. Mm-hmm. So speaking of communities, tell us a little bit about that. I mean, I think you shared a couple of good, really interesting examples.
Yeah, so that was interesting times. I know most people don't do it now, and I think we had a really great open culture kind of when it comes to building the product in kind of this really open way. But pretty much all the product managers on our team had Twitter accounts. It was kind of one of the working tools, so to say, which I know you would be surprised, kind of as a product manager, Twitter is your tool. And we would go there, just suggest ideas. We'll say, we're thinking about improving checkout, and we're thinking of doing this and that. You have one day to give us your feedback, and then people will actually go in there, comment, argue with each other, disagree and agree, and then by the end of the day, you already have this community validated idea of what you should be doing. Then we will take that, build it, and then obviously we were receiving a lot of positive feedback because it was exactly what people wanted. So while it's not necessarily kind of your typical quantitative data where you see what people are clicking, which flows they go to, where they drop off, but that was a kind of our way of getting qualitative data to understand if we should be investing in something.
Got it. Great. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit from the Magento experience to the BigCommerce experience. If you can share some examples of how, first of all, BigCommerce, is it SaaS, is it on-prem, is it open source? And then how, any examples of where you were using data to drive decisions on the roadmap or other parts of the business in that context?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a really big transition for me, especially when we talk about the data-driven decisions, because I just shared with you how limited access to the data I had. And to be honest, I didn't even understand that people can have so much more data. So when I joined BigCommerce, we had data on pretty much everything. So we knew how many customers we had exactly, because all of them obviously were provisioned by us. We knew when was the last time they actually transacted on this platform. I know when was the last time they logged in, which features did they use, what kind of apps, if we're talking about additional community apps that they have installed and stuff like that. In addition to that, we also had like events where we would see, I know people actually want, like, for example, we would implement a new feature, and we will instrument different events, and we would know that, like, okay, so this is a new feature. Now we're seeing that those customers across those kind of profiles, when they're clicked a couple of buttons, maybe dropped off, and then based on that, we would be able to make decisions into the design of a product and what we should be building and why not. So that was a completely different world. Definitely, I was like blown away by amount of data and kind of didn't even know where to start, because I'm used to kind of this like really limited qualitative data and the Twitter as being one of the big sources for validating what I should be focusing on.
Yeah, it is a very interesting transition that you're calling out when you move to a SaaS type of a product, the amount of information that you can capture. And in our experience with Immersa, what we've seen with clients is that they're pulling data from product analytics tools that measure the front end engagement in the application, from the back end product databases, from log files, from APM products. I mean, the possibilities are endless. One of the things I do find, though, is a lot of that data remains locked in with product and engineering teams. Why do you think that is? Why isn't it more easily available or consumable for business teams?
Yeah, so you're actually like bringing up a really interesting point, right? So then, like in the SaaS world, you have a lot of data available to you. However, one of the biggest challenges that a lot of people deal with is that you have this data in unstructured way. And first, like, again, when I speak about my personal experience, going back to my Magenta days, I always wanted to have a lot of data. And then on that one date, or on that one day when I switched from Magenta to BigCommerce in the SaaS world, I received a lot of data, but it was so much, and in so many different shapes and forms. You had a lot of different events that you didn't even know what it meant. So it was almost impossible to actually drive any conclusions from it. And because some of those events and some of those kind of things that you're going to be talking about, like, they are not technical, but they are not named in a way kind of that would be self-explanatory to a lot of other teams who are not necessarily so deeply involved in the product. So a lot of people try to stay away from it. Like, they actually look at the marketing data and how often people open emails and stuff like that, but not necessarily going into the product itself. So to answer your question, like, concisely, I think it's because like a lot of data is being available in a structured way, and if people don't have a way to actually make it structured and also easily consumable, then most of them don't even know where to start. They look at the data, they're supposed to be happy with it, but then they feel paralyzed, not knowing what is the next step.
I think that's such a key insight, the analysis paralysis, when you're sort of faced with too much information and not in a way that's easily consumable. I think so. Elena, let's maybe talk about your role at Spryker, and obviously, you've been there now for some time and been instrumental in driving kind of this data-driven mindset and thinking through these decisions. I think that the conversation's in two parts. One is you're collecting a lot of data that you're making available to your customers to help them make decisions. So these are e-commerce stores, both B2B and B2C, marketplaces that you're powering. Can you first share a little bit on that front? Like, what types of data sets and what types of insights driven off of data are available to your customers using Spryker? And then we'll talk about how you're using data internally.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about what our customers typically want, so obviously all of our customers, they are big businesses who came to us because they want to have digital commerce channels. So either it's in addition to what they're already doing or just primarily digital commerce, but I know most of the time it's in addition to all the different channels that they already have. So when the customer comes to us and says, well, I know I'm this big corporation, I've been selling products for hundreds of years now, but I actually never been in digital commerce. I want to try out this channel. So for them, the ROI is definitely something that is really interesting. So they want to understand how much and how often do people are going to be going to them for buying something online, when especially if you're in B2B and you always have this really close relationships with your sellers, with your dealers, and kind of you just used to have a lot of different contracts and a lot of different negotiations of the prices for a specific seller. And then if you now transition that whole thing to the digital commerce, you kind of take away that personal touch. So all of this is kind of typically a big challenge for our customers, but then they also want to understand, like, is it actually working? So everything related to even the number of visits, how often do people come to the site? I know, are they actually, like, what are they adding into the orders? How many sessions they have, what's in the order, are they actually placing the orders themselves, or are they still calling for help to the sales rep that they used to work with? So can they do it in a self-serve fashion or not? And then all those things, like a typical conversion rate that everybody's striving for in the digital commerce. So all of those type of things is something that our customers want, and they want to have access to this data and then start driving a lot of different data-driven decisions, because that helps them understand how to improve their businesses.
It's fascinating. And so one of the things that we do know about e-commerce is that it happens over multiple channels, and the number of channels keeps growing. And so the old world where you would get on the phone and place an order after watching a television show, that was digital commerce. And the new world is you can go on Instagram, you can go on possibly on X, or previously Twitter, or in the future, and literally like a website, any place on your phone, you can now place an order for something online. And so when you think about the problem from a Spryker product perspective, how do you think about all these different ways in which consumers interact with your customers, and therefore being able to have visibility into all those different data streams? Like, what are some of the technical challenges you encounter in dealing with this issue on behalf of your customers?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. That problem is first of all real and really significant, right? Because so I already mentioned that a lot of our customers typically have a digital commerce in addition to what they're doing. Yeah. So in addition to having like different ways how you can do digital commerce, whether you do your typical kind of B2C, B2B, kind of where you actually buy online. For example, at Spryker, a lot of our customers are also interested in kind of like IoT strategy, where you can have really smart device that is going to be placing an order themselves. So like you don't even have this like typical checkout process and order placement process. So a lot of our customers, even if they use primarily Spryker, they want to understand how different channels are performing, because if they invested in, for example, IoT as one of the strategies, they want to understand, is that channel worth investing? But then they typically have other ways of selling, not even digitally. So they want to combine this whole data together and understand, is my business profitable? Am I selling the right things? What are the things that people are buying? And then also, is there any, not dependency, but is there any nuance, kind of what is actually being sold on what channel? So then I can actually optimize and select certain types of products for certain channels. So when it comes back to what we're doing, so we're typically, like, our goal is to democratize the data and make sure that our customers have the access to this data, so then they can combine our data that we have at Spryker with a lot of other data sources that they have, and then they can start running the kind of their data-driven decisions how they see fit. So for example, just even thinking like hypothetically, tools like Immersa, for example, is probably one of the great solutions for them, where they can actually take all this data and understand kind of how their business is going, and kind of see certain trends across channels and in business in general.
Got it. So from a data standpoint, and are there some certainly, are there like technical challenges that you see where, for example, data coming out of Instagram or Twitter or X, as they call it now, is it different data than, say, what's originating from a website, or what's originating from a point of sale system in a store, or what's originating from a procurement mechanism for a B2B transactional kind of a system in a B2B e-commerce case, like what are some of the technical challenges that you encounter in your product that your engineering teams are trying to solve for?
Yeah, so absolutely. Like I think each channel has, first of all, different types of data, and they go to different levels. And especially if you deal with a lot of different SaaS products or SaaS solutions, like for example, let's say if we're talking about Facebook, or if some of the people are selling on Amazon, the amount of data that you get back is highly dependent on the platform that you're choosing to do commerce on. So for example, Instagram is going to give you, I know, a little bit more data than Amazon would ever do that. And then on top of that, then you add another layer kind of where you actually get the data in a completely different way. And it's like you might be naming things, I know, in one place it's an order, and in a different place it might be called something else. So then the customers kind of then need to understand how to normalize the data and make sure that all the systems kind of speak about the same thing. So then you can actually start driving those cross-channel decisions and insights. So there's, I think the data is definitely has been a big challenge, and also making it accessible as to what we were discussing at the beginning. So then even if you collect all this data, how to prepare it in a consumable and digestible way, I think is a big challenge. I don't think it's actually completely solved yet. That's the challenge that we've been solving. And I've been part of it, like at both Magento, BigCommerce, and even for Spryker and our customers, it still kind of remains a big challenge. And every single time we're trying to make it easier for customers to actually drive the decisions from it.
Got it. So, Elena, just shifting gears a little bit to the internal conversation at Spryker. I know you're instrumental in enabling your business teams with information about or data about what customers are doing in your product and how to read that data in a way that drives some meaningful decisions. Can you share a little bit about which teams that you feel internally need to be empowered in making these data-driven decisions, and how are you going about that? How are you thinking about the problem?
Yeah, so all those challenges that we were just discussing are still true for us as well. So we are, I would say, like we're also like at the very beginning on where we want to go over time. But ultimately, like if we're talking about the vision and the view, we always talk about Spryker as intelligent composition platform for digital commerce. And what it means is that we want to get to the point where we understand exactly what customers need, not only in terms of their business KPIs, but even in terms of what would be the best configuration of the product that will help them achieve the KPIs. And for that, like, I know the thing that we're working on right now is building this intelligent platform where, I know, for example, the customer comes to us and says, I'm working in this vertical, in this geography, and in this business model, and I want to build this best of the best digital commerce channel for my business. So we want to suggest them kind of like, this is actually kind of how you should be composing your system, kind of which pieces should you stitch together, whether it's something that we have built or maybe our partners have built, because ultimately we want to optimize for their success, because our success with them is a shared success. And then going back to your question, like which teams would need to know this data. Ultimately, it would mean that all the teams would need to have access to this data, because the product team needs to have the data in order to build the product, this intelligent platform that allows you kind of to stitch together exactly what you need. But then the customer success team would need to have this data, because they need to understand, oh, okay, like, you know, there is this customer and they had those goals. We have suggested them this type of setup. Are they actually achieving this goal or maybe not? And then trigger some kind of action so then we can proactively go in and help the customer be successful. I know the finance team would need to know about it. I know the technology team would need to understand what are the capabilities that are being heavily used, so then we can optimize their performance, scalability and stuff like that. So we have really big plans and goals for what we want to do with data. And as I said, like we're pretty much taking like every day small step in that direction, because we truly believe that's where the future is going.
Got it. Do you feel that product teams now have a responsibility to provide information and data-driven sort of insights to their organizations to operate better, in addition to building the product, which has always been the responsibility of the product team? Has something changed in the last few years in that regard?
Yeah, I'm glad that you actually bring that up, because I do think that a lot of things have changed in the product management world. Again, even like looking back at my journey, right? Like you were at the beginning as a product manager responsible for the feature function and kind of what the feature does, going in the details of what it is. But what you were not necessarily as much responsible for is the whole adoption of the product and making sure that the product is being adopted. Like, in the previous mentality, the moment when you understood the problem, you built a solution, you have shipped it, you were kind of pretty much done, with what you were doing, and then you were jumping and building something else. Now, and that's actually something that we also just recently with my product management team talked about at Spryker. We think that there is a third diamond to kind of this double diamond approach, where you need to understand the problem that you're solving. You need to find the best solution to that problem. And then you should be actively responsible for adoption of this product. Because if you have built something that nobody's using, then you have made a bunch of wrong decisions. And that should not be somebody else's job. It shouldn't be customer for life team. We call customer success customer for life at Spryker. It shouldn't be somebody else's job. It should be the product management together with cross-functional teams, whoever need to be there, helping that product to be adopted. And then if it's not being adopted, so either we solve the wrong problem from the very beginning, which is a much bigger problem, or maybe our solution has not been the best and we just need to fine tune it and actually just find the angle, how to make it work for the customers. And for that, data is critical, because otherwise you cannot rely on Twitter and as on to what I was relying at the beginning of my career to make those decisions. You should have the data in order to tell you how is your product being adopted and how can you make that better than what you originally has built.
Got it. I think I really appreciate the insight that the responsibility for driving adoption of the product is really the product leader and the product team's responsibility, obviously in conjunction with other teams in the organization. How do you think about problems like around renewals or expansion or growth in an account, or potentially churn risk in an account? Like what type of data or metrics, in particular, like what metrics can the product organization provide their customer success teams to empower them with better decisions on how to engage their clients?
Yeah, well, first of all, absolutely, I think there's so much potential to actually drive the product adoption. And even when we talk about the renewals, not even talking about the cross-sell and upsell, because I think that is obvious how data is going to help there. But if we're talking about the churn risks and kind of upcoming renewals, having the data where customer success team can take a look at kind of how is my customer using the product, not in terms of like what they're saying, right? Because people are always, being nicer than what the actual data might show. So I think it's really important to understand how, to what extent is product being used. Are we seeing the growth of interest, or is kind of adoption declining? And then kind of, if we have the data and if we have sufficient data and we actually know kind of what triggers what, ideally kind of all of those churn risks are easily preventable, because you would understand the early signs of it, like kind of like the leading indicators that there might be a possibility of a churn risk because somebody is declining the usage of the product that you have. And that way kind of, somebody from the customer success team can jump in and help and consult. And that's also ultimately what we are doing now a lot. Just kind of using the data that we have available, but we also want to get to the point where it's way more programmatic and easily kind of instrumented than what we have right now.
So early warning signals for the customer success teams based on the customer's behavior and usage of the product, right? That's actually
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so on the product management side, we're going to reveal something new and exciting. Talk to us about the Triple Diamond Framework.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were So this is something that we kind of, I think, invented with my team. So we were looking at the typical double diamond framework that a lot of people use. I know you need to understand the problem really well and kind of make all the hypotheses and test that out. And then you need to also talk about the solution. And that's kind of where the whole implementation starts and kind of validation of the actual solution. But then we realized that like if we do the two diamonds correctly and we actually have the solution and it's available and it's released and then our job is done, then the product is never going to be adopted, because adoption should be kind of this guiding process. It should be kind of something that we offer, and we go this extra mile to make sure that our customers have the best experience of adopting every single thing that we deliver on Spryker. And that's exactly kind of what we're working on right now. So we kind of internalized and, as I said, like kind of invented this triple diamond framework. So the adoption diamond is actually where we do a lot of data-driven decisions. We're looking into the ways, how can we optimize the usage, the user experience, where can we develop some of those early warning signs for customer success team if, for example, we're seeing that adoption is not there, so then we can go back to the drawing board and start making the adjustments. So that's something that we're super proud of, because we believe that that is going to change completely how the products are being built, how are they being adopted by the customers, and most importantly is going to drive adoption of the customer solutions that we're building for them every single day.
Amazing. So I think that is such a powerful idea from a product standpoint. The traditional viewpoint of let's figure out what's the problem we're solving, and then form an hypotheses and then come up with some solutions. And you're saying, well, that's not enough. You've got to extend that out, particularly in the SaaS world, to be able to drive adoption. And so this triple diamond framework as a methodology, I feel like has so much value and sort of such a strong idea behind it, that I hope it finds much broader adoption outside of your team. But you heard it here first. So
yes, absolutely. That's the first time where we talk about it publicly somewhere.
There you go.
Thanks for giving us a space.
Fantastic. So Elena, I think it's a wonderful conversation. A lot of great insights on the use of data, in particular in the e-commerce domain. I want to wrap this up by asking you a question. What's your advice for young people who are just starting their careers and thinking about product management as an option? It is not something that you can sign up for a class and learn in school. It's something that people sort of gravitate towards, and of course you can educate yourself through other experiences and so on. But what advice you'd have for somebody who's just starting out and thinking about product management as a career choice?
Well, I truly believe that product management is one of the coolest jobs that you can ever have. I truly believe in that. And I think product management is right for you if you're curious, if you have a lot of empathy to other people, because you're not going to be building most of the time solutions for yourself. You're going to be building products for other people. So you need to be empathetic and understand what exactly are they trying to solve and how can you help them. And you also need to be technology savvy. You don't need to be an engineer, but you need to be technical enough to understand what is available out there, try out different technological solutions, and just be brave and try different things. And then hopefully once you have the data, that data is going to tell you, have you made the right bets or not? So those are the three or the four probably important things that each person deciding for the product management job needs to have. Curiosity, empathy, being technology savvy, and also be curious for the data.
That's an awesome framework and really good advice for anybody thinking about moving into a product management role. So if people want to learn more about any of the things we've discussed today or the Triple Diamond Framework, how do they find you?
So LinkedIn is probably the best channel. I'm really active on LinkedIn, so please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I always respond to the messages and the comments. So reach out, would be happy to chat with you, to learn about the challenges that you have, and hear also your stories about what you have been doing with data or not in product management in general. So reach out, always happy to have conversations with others.
Elena, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate all the insights you've shared with us today. For our audience, either joining us live or listening to this show afterwards, thank you for being a part of this journey with us. If you have any questions for Elena or myself, reach out to us on LinkedIn. If you have suggestions on who we should invite to our next show or to our future shows, please reach out to me directly at asim@immersa.co. And we would love to continue to have this conversation in public about how data can help drive your business and really surface the stories of the datapreneurs who are trying to make a difference in the way that they run their businesses.